Leaders are not born. Leaders become. People become leaders. Leadership is a process. I do not think great leaders like Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther or Nelson Mandela or any leader for that matter were born leaders. They became leaders for a purpose. Our own founders and foundresses, they were leaders for a purpose. They became leaders. Leadership is a process. And in that sense, Peter and Paul were leaders, but they were not born leaders. They became leaders through a process. And it is good to learn something of their leadership qualities, how they were processed to become a good leaders, a good type of leaders. Let me put it in the form of ABCD formula, easy for you to understand. And those formula to be a leader is good for us too, to be a good leader today. The first thing both had, Peter and Paul, were accompany people. Accompaniment. Peter and Paul accompanied people in their own ways. That means we can accompany different ways. It's not necessary you literally walk with the people. If that is there, very good. But accompanying people can be different ways. My status logo in social media is I wish to walk with you. That does not mean literally walking. Accompanying it means. What is this accompaniment? A very favorite term, concept of Pope Francis in all his writings. Accompaniment, Peter did one particular way. He was entrusted with Christian community. His presence with the Christian community was a kind of accompaniment. He did not travel much. Whereas St. Paul accompanied people by traveling as a missionary, accompanied people through his writing, through his preaching, and through his argumentative style. So that was his accompaniment. So both had different ways of accompanying. And all of us need to accompany people. That's the first quality of leadership. Second quality, become aware of your belief system and faith and limitations and imperfections. Paul and Peter were aware of their imperfections. They were not the best leaders of the Lord. In fact, I love Peter. Peter always puts his foot in the mouth and gets into trouble. Always. You know, when Jesus was walking on the water, he jumped into the water and he started to drown. Trouble. When Peter said, "You are the Christ, Son of the living God," today's gospel, afterwards he gets into trouble again and Jesus has to scold him. Or at the Last Supper, when Jesus was trying to wash the feet, Peter questions the washing. And when the purpose of washing was explained, he says, "Wash my whole body." When Peter was warned about denying Jesus, he denies that he would not deny Jesus. Always he gets into trouble. Peter denied many a time. He was not a strong rock. He was not a strong rock. He was aware of his imperfections. Paul, still worse. Paul, persecutor of the church, he was constantly aware of his origin and limitations. He used to preach about it, that he used to persecute. He was aware of his own weakness. He says in one of his books, writings, "There is a thorn in my flesh that constantly disturbing me." And he says, "I want to do something right thing, but the wrong thing I do. I want to do something good, something bad I do. The thing I just want to do, I do the opposite." That is his imperfection. And Peter and Paul were not actually people who were to be admired today as great leaders and all that. They were imperfect people. They were not best people. They were better people than Peter. John, most loved disciple, or sons of thunder strong, or even Judas Iscariot. Financial acumen he had. Peter did not have any of these qualities. But Jesus chose these two disciples as leaders. Third thing is commitment and dedication of these two disciples or two apostles. They were committed though they were imperfect. They were committed till the end. And we have the famous statement of St. Paul, "Woe to me if I don't preach the gospel." Or today's second reading, I have run the race. I have fought a good fight. I have kept my faith. So that's how they looked at their life. Even Peter, we read in the first reading, how strong he was towards the end of his life with a strong, deep faith when he was imprisoned. He had the faith. That commitment and dedication is very important. Even though all of us may be imperfect people, weak people. But one of the differences between Peter and Paul and their imperfections are this. Peter speaks before thinking, and Paul thinks before speaking. And because of this, both got into trouble. Paul's argumentation sometimes got into trouble. Famous, speech at Areopagus with the philosophers. He got into trouble. He was a good thinker. He thought well before speaking, but he was in trouble. Peter speaks before thinking. That also got into trouble many a times with our Lord. But it does not matter, provided grace of God was with them. And the grace of God was always with them. The Lord was with them. It was not Peter and Paul who built the church. It was the Lord who built the church through Peter and Paul. Psalm 127 says, "Unless the Lord builds a house, in vain do his builders labor."